I would like to now introduce to you representatives from GRAIL, both Kate Harfe and Lieutenant Kevin McFarland. As they make their way up here, Lieutenant McFarland, a lifelong firefighter and fitness junkie whose stage 1 cancer was found with the help from the Galleri multi-cancer early detection blood test. Attendees today will also learn about screening for many deadly cancers with a single blood test and find out about the testing process used by fire and police departments nationwide. Kate Harfe, please help give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I apologize. The eternal Mac versus PC war continues. Okay, so yes, I'm Kate Harfe. I am a medical science liaison for the commercial laboratory GRAIL, which is the company that offers the GRAIL or the Galleri blood-based cancer screening tests that I'm going to give you a little bit of information about. So full disclosure, I am employed by GRAIL. I am a stockholder with GRAIL. Really the highlight, the main event for this particular session is going to be the conversation with Kevin, who will share his experience with an early stage cancer diagnosis. So, but before we do that, I've got some background information that's going to kind of get everybody up to speed on what the Galleri test is, what it can do, and then also GRAIL's experience working with tens and thousands of firefighters over the roughly 5 years since this test became available. So I'm going to see how far my slide advancer will actually reach. And it does not. So next slide, please. Okay, so a lot of this background information we've already seen multiple times today, right? So we know cancer is a huge problem. Roughly half of all men will receive a cancer diagnosis and about a third of all women at some point in their life. And we know about 1 in 5 of all of us will ultimately perish from cancer. So that's not an outcome that any of us wants, and we definitely want to do better. Next slide, please. All right, so far and away, our biggest risk factor for having cancer is simply being human and having birthdays, right? So the risk of cancer increases with age, and that's because the genetic changes, the DNA changes that lead to cancer tend to accumulate over time. But age is certainly not the only risk factor, right? There's a lot of things that we do, that we're exposed to, that can increase that risk and can lead potentially to earlier development of cancer or higher risk of cancer. And of course, we spent a lot of time today talking about all the many things that do increase that cancer risk in firefighters. Next slide. Again, list of chemicals. We don't need to beat that horse anymore. Next slide. Okay. Again, this is familiar, right? Both increased chance of receiving a cancer diagnosis for firefighters, as well as passing away from cancer due to all of those many risk factors. Next slide. All right, so early detection really is the key. And again, we've seen a lot of these statistics already. Bottom line, if you have an early stage diagnosis of cancer, you're more than 4 times as likely to survive 5 years later than if you have a late stage diagnosis. And we know a huge chunk of the advances we've made in cancer survival statistics really relate to those opportunities for early detection. Next slide. We have established screening programs for a grand total of 5 cancers. Together, those 5 cancers correspond to about 30% of cancer-related deaths. Next, please. So about 70% of cancer deaths coming from cancers that we don't have established screening programs for. So then the question is, what do we do about that, right? Our current screening paradigm is each individual cancer gets a different test. So 5 cancers, 5 different tests. Along with that comes false positive rates. Each of them has a false positive rate of 10% or more. So now think about dozens and dozens of additional cancers. That model, having a separate test for each individual cancer, just simply isn't scalable, right? We have to find a different way. Next slide. So this is where this brand new class of cancer screening tests comes into play. Our test, Galleri, was launched almost 5 years ago. There are several others that are now available, all using the same basic idea. Can we look at analytes that are present in the blood and use that to screen for cancer? A lot of these tests look at, Back, please. A lot of these look at what we call cell-free DNA. So those are small fragments of DNA that are floating free in the blood. They're not contained within a cell, and that's because they're the product of cell death, right? Cells die, they get broken down, that material then goes into the blood to be disposed of, and we can isolate that. We can get those DNA fragments out of the blood, and then we can analyze them in different ways that can let us know if there's an increased chance that those fragments have been released from cancer cells as opposed to healthy cells. Next slide. All right, so a test like this doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a long process of research that goes into developing any kind of medical advance. And there's different ways to do that. So this is sort of a simplified timeline of the different kinds of research studies that go into developing a test like this and understanding how it performs. So in early stages, we do what we're called case control studies, where we work with samples that have known status. We know if it's a cancer sample, we know what kind of cancer that was, and we know what stage that was. And if it's a healthy sample, we follow up and we make sure that that person really didn't have cancer at the time that their sample was obtained. And so that allows us to do things like calculate sensitivity, which is the ability of that test to detect whatever it's looking for. We think about cancer, or we talk about cancer as if it's one thing, but every single cancer is a different disease. They all behave differently, and that means things like sensitivity are likely to be different. And in the case of a blood-based assay, the ability of that test to detect the cancer really depends on how much of what's being tested is put into the blood. So in this case, cell-free DNA. How much cell-free DNA is a cancer putting into the blood? That depends on the behavior of the cancer. A slow-growing cancer that doesn't access the bloodstream is not going to shed a lot of DNA into the blood. That's going to be hard to detect. A very aggressive cancer that accesses the bloodstream, uses the vasculature to feed itself, that's a cancer that's going to put a lot of DNA into the blood, and it's going to make it a lot easier to detect. So then once a test gets onto the market, that's not enough. We want to continue to do studies. We want to see what this looks like out in the population. When you take it into screening, where you don't know what the status of those people is when they get their screen, what does it look like? What kind of cancers does it detect? What does it take to follow up? And so we've conducted studies all along this continuum, and so that's the source of some of this information that I'm going to provide to you now. Next slide. All right, so this summarizes performance of the Galleri test from a couple of these different study designs, right? So sensitivity, the ability of the test to detect cancer. If we consider a group of 12 cancers that are collectively some of our most aggressive, so that includes things like esophageal cancer, head and neck cancer, take that back, head and neck may not be on that list. Overall, sensitivity for that group of 12 that causes about 2/3 of cancer-related deaths, 76%. If we consider all cancers that were enrolled in the studies, more than 50 types of cancer across all stages, that's about a 51% sensitivity. And remember, most of those cancers don't have any screening at all. In terms of false positive rate, I mentioned that with our single cancer screens, each of those has over 10% false positive rate. And that's because they are calibrated to have a high sensitivity. In a test like this, the Galleri test, in a screening study in the intended use population, adults over 50, that false positive rate was demonstrated to be 0.4%, or only about 1 in 250. What that means in the real world is that not a lot of people that get this kind of screening end up getting a false positive or go through unnecessary diagnostic evaluation. And that's really important for conserving our healthcare resources. Positive predictive value. That's a metric that maybe you don't talk about very much, but it is the chance that when you get a positive screen result, that person actually has the condition that was flagged by the screen. So for cancer screens in general, or single cancer screens, those positive predictive values, the chance of a cancer diagnosis is single digits, right? So for a mammogram, for instance, is somewhere between 4 and 5% that a person that gets an abnormal mammogram will ultimately be diagnosed with breast cancer as a result. With this kind of testing, because of the way it's calibrated, positive predictive value is just under 62%. So positive result, much more likely than not to actually result in a cancer diagnosis. And that's important because once you get a positive screen result, you need to understand how urgent it is and pursue that diagnostic evaluation. One component of a test like this that can potentially detect any of dozens of different cancers is that instead of just providing a positive result that says, okay, this person has increased chance of cancer, 62% chance that they have cancer, go find it. It's important that a test offers something that we call a cancer signal origin. So it is an additional component of the test that can tell with a high degree of accuracy what type of cancer that person is likely to have. So for Galleri, that cancer signal origin is over 93% accurate. So if that person actually has cancer, more than 93% of the time, it's going to be in the tissue or organ that the test predicts. That means that that diagnostic evaluation can focus in on a particular organ or anatomical region instead of sending every person with a positive screen result for a full body workup, right? Again, that's not efficient. That's not a good use of resources. Next slide, please. All right, so in this prospective study, this screening study in the intended use population, it's called Pathfinder 2, we evaluated performance of this test in a cohort of ultimately almost 36,000. We have an initial analysis of just about 25,000 individuals that had this test. And what we found is that in that population, adding this blood-based Galleri screening test to usual care resulted in a substantial increase in the number of screen-detected cancers when compared to our standard of care, our usual care alone. Our USPSTF guideline recommended screens are broken into categories depending on the level of recommendation. So A and B level recommended screens have more blanket recommendations across the population, whereas a C level screen is more on an individual decision-making basis. So A level screens, that is breast, cervical, colorectal, and lung screening. And then C-level screening is for PSA screening for prostate cancer. So if we consider just those A and B more universally recommended screens, adding in the MCED test, the Galleri test, led to a 7-fold increase in screen-detected cancers in that screen cohort. If we include the prostate cancers that were detected from PSA, there's still a 3-fold increase in screen detection of cancer with implementing this. So it's not meant to replace what we're already doing for recommended screening modalities, but in order to add additional opportunity for detection of cancer that otherwise wouldn't be detected until it became symptomatic. All right, next slide, please. All right, so in this screening study, there were 133 individuals that had a cancer detected by the MCED test. If we break it down by stage at diagnosis, we can see that 53.5% of those cancers that were detected by the blood-based screen were in fact early stage cancers, and that's what we want. If we take a look at what those cancers were, 3/4 of them were in fact cancers that are not otherwise addressed by our recommended screening, right? So that shows that this test really is doing what we expect it to do. It is supplementing what we're already doing with established screening. And those early stage cancers included things like head and neck cancer. There were 14 head and neck cancers detected by the screen in the study, and all 14 of them were stage 1 or stage 2. There were early stage liver cancers, pancreatic cancer, kidney, lung. There were even early stage cancers that are the kinds that are covered by our screening modalities, because we know there is no such thing as a perfect screen. All right, next slide, please. All right, so Galleri has been utilized in partnerships with fire departments across the country, again, for years now. And so we have done our best to collect outcomes and provide summary of kind of what that experience looks like so that we can share that with you. Next slide. All right, so as of late last summer, which is when these numbers were collected, we had screened over 32,000 firefighters across the country with Galleri. And what we saw was that performance was pretty similar to what we would expect in the general population in terms of increased screen positivity with increased age. That is, there's evidence that age is still a significant risk factor in the firefighter group, as it is with the general population. If we look at those who were under 50 when they were screened, we saw about 1.5 in 1,000 screens returned a positive result. In 50 to 64, that bumped up to about 4 in 1,000, and for those 65 years and over, it was about 15 positive results per 1,000. Reporting on outcomes is entirely voluntary, right? So what that means is we don't have full information on what all of those outcomes were. But we do know that there are a number of cancers that have been diagnosed as a result of Galleri screening. Next slide, please. All right, if we look at the cancer signals that are reported, that is the type of cancers that are predicted, the breakdown is pretty similar to what we see in the general population. So far and away, the most common predicted signal is for a lymphoid origin. And we see quite a few of head and neck. Can't really read that from here, but we see, a lot of it's fairly similar to what we see in the general population. And we know as of the end of August, out of 93 positive tests, we know that there had been 25 confirmed cancers. All right, next slide. Okay, so now to transition to what really is the important part of this. This is one of our true positives. This is our very special guest, Kevin McFarland, who is going to share his experience with his life as a firefighter, having Galleri screening, and then his journey with cancer. And we're going to sit over there for this. Okay. All right, they tell us that these microphones are going to pick this up. So hopefully that'll work. All right. Okay, that works too. All right. Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing. Do you want to start just by telling everybody who you are and talk about your career?
My name's Kevin McFarland. I was a lieutenant with the Violet Township Fire Department just on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. 30 years total in the fire service, last 26 being full-time. I was lucky enough to have the best job in the world. Got to ride the right front seat of a heavy rescue every day. Loved what I did. I taught a lot on my days off. I taught for the Ohio Fire Academy, for Bowling Green State University, for a couple other places, and then finally out at FDTN, the Fire Department Training Network in Indianapolis. So I lived the job. Was very blessed to have a supportive family, wife and 2 kids. I have twins, a boy and a girl that are 21. Both of them now are in the service. My daughter's a dispatcher and my son is a firefighter. So got to kind of to live the dream, do it. Was one of those that when I first started, for the older ones of us in the crowd, that we talked earlier about maybe not wearing your mask as much as you should have, especially training fires and things like that. I thought of also some of the buildings that we trained in were not the greatest shape when you get a house to burn. Then you go in to fix it up so you can burn it, and it might have mold and other things in it, and we never wore masks. So there's some of that I was exposed to that I just put off. It would never happen to me, and was just trucking along. And my plan was, I just retired the 26th of last month. Had to medically retire. We'll kind of get into that a little further, but I was trucking along. I wanted to do 5 more years and finish up and retire on my terms, but the test and some things had a different plan for me. But what I did get to do, I loved the job, I missed the job, but I had the best job in the world, like I said, riding that right front seat.
Awesome, thank you. So tell us a little bit about your general health, your kind of thoughts about taking care of your health kind of around the time that you had your screening.
I had been traveling, training and everything, known about cancer, different things. Tried to take care of myself. I was quite a bit heavier before surgery, but was still only about 220 pounds. was in shape, went to the gym 5-6 times a week. I have an infrared sauna in my house that I would detox and do the sauna on my own. I love to go out and rock, was doing fitness, was doing everything. Never really thought anything about it. Knew cancer was in the forefront, but you know, some of the things that's been talked about, we mentioned earlier, we cleaned our gear. We had a backup set of gear. Did I wash my helmet like was mentioned earlier as much as I should have? Probably not. Just like everybody else, especially the inside of it. But just kind of was just trucking along, thought I was taking care of myself, you know, and just figured it's one of those where it's not going to be me. I mean, to be 100% honest, I was a stubborn firefighter up until probably 6 months before my diagnosis. I did not even have a primary care physician. And I won't call out people in the room to see if you have one or not, but typical firefighters, I didn't go to the doctor. I would self-medicate if needed, but other than that, I was fairly healthy and just trucking along, thinking I'm going to do 5 more years and then find something else to do in life or just enjoy retirement.
So safe to say you weren't experiencing anything that was of concern?
No symptoms. I had
You're the
no
bulletproof firefighter.
nothing. Yep, that's what I thought. Yes.
Okay. All right, so then along comes Galleri. Can you talk about how that was introduced with your department?
Our fire chief was at a conference and learned about the test, and our department was very proactive about health and wellness. We had a trainer, we have a physical therapist that comes in once a week. So we're very progressive with that. And he came back and he said, you know what, I've got it in the budget, we're gonna do this test. And it was sent out and it was optional. And at first I saw the email and stuff for it and I'm like, I don't know if I'm even gonna do this. You know, just typical firefighter mentality of it. And then it was like, hey, they're coming to the firehouse. You don't even have to be fasting, because another true firefighter joke, our blood work and stuff when we do our physicals with what we consider fasting to go in for blood work usually means that I've had 3 or 4 cups of coffee and maybe something else before I went in to have my blood work done. But they brought it to the firehouse, decided to do our blood work right there. It was great. We were on duty, did it for 3 days straight. It was one of the easiest tests I've ever done. And I went in, did it, and it was like, okay, check that box, it's done. We're good to go.
Okay, so then you got your results. About how long did that take, and how did you get those results?
It took a couple weeks, and some of the guys around the firehouse were starting to talk about it because they're like, hey, did you get an email, said you were okay? And I'm like, no. And they'd said you'd get a phone call if there was something wrong, and it was in April of 2024. I got the phone call at home, said, hey, you have signals for esophageal, colorectal, and stomach cancer. And they were great. I still get through this, sorry.
Yeah.
But the lady on the phone was apologetic. I started laughing. I go, it's not your fault. Like, you just have the job. You have to call people and tell them they have cancer or they possibly have cancer. So she started laughing, made me laugh a little bit. But typical fashion too, I hung up the phone and I'm like, I'll do something with this in a few days. I wasn't even going to call my doctor. I was like, we'll figure it out. Maybe it's a false positive. I just, you know, it was one of those where in the back of my head, I'm smart enough to realize I should have done something with it right away. But firefighter wise, it's like, yeah, screw it, I'm doing something else. You know.
So then what changed your mind? Made you follow up?
I have no idea. I was either bored or I had something I could, you know, and I called my doctor, and this is where some of the problems, I wouldn't say, I guess problems with the healthcare system, or what you want to call it in our country that we have. I called my primary doctor, told him I was sending these results over. I needed a referral to go get a scope, and I heard nothing back. So I heard nothing back, and I live close to my primary care physician, so I just drove over there. I'm like, hey, I sent you guys this stuff. And they thought it was, I would always send them my physical work and everything from the firehouse, so they just put it in my file, have it in my file. They thought it was something like that. So they pulled it out, but nobody had heard of this test. So when you do start these tests, and if something happens, you have to explain. So every doctor in this whole process I went to, I had to explain what the test was and why I was there. especially because I had no symptoms. I did not have reflux. I did not have, issues swallowing or anything like that. I had just had a colonoscopy that for some reason the year before, I was like, hey, I'm in my late 40s. I should probably have one. So I did. They accepted that. So then it was on to a scope for the next step.
And so you underwent that, and what did they tell you?
It ended up in 2 parts. So we went the first time and had a scope. And he's like, your stomach's clear, we can see it clearly, but he's like, lower part of your esophagus, and my doctor was really cool, he goes, looks kind of gnarly. I'm like, okay. It's like, you're speaking my medical terms now. I don't know what that means, but it's probably not good. And he said, I'm gonna put you on some medicine, I want you to come back in 3 months. So this is where you also learn that when you do get sick, nothing happens fast. So I did that, didn't think anything of it, back to work, back teaching, back doing stuff, out doing live burns, no concern. Went back in September for another scope, and it was funny, the night before we'd had a run where in one of our local restaurants a car had driven into it, kind of a mass casualty thing, we were there. So the doctor's like, hey, I saw this on the news, were you there? So we're shooting about that, laughing going into the procedure. Come back out, I wake up, he comes in, and I can tell right away on his face, something's wrong. And he starts talking about stage. And for those of you in the room that's heard it, that one hits. When they come in, they're starting, he's like, hey, we'll stage it, I'll call you tomorrow for sure. And I was like, oh, okay. So I got to change some plans. It's like, hey, I'm doing this in the next couple of weeks. It's like, I'm trying to throw humor back into it. And he called me the next day, September 24th of 2024. I got the call that I had stage 1, or I had esophageal cancer. He did not give me an actual stage yet. We had to do a third scope where they did the EUS. So they did an ultrasound scope, able to see the tumor, stage it at like a 1B, I think it was officially. And I was trying to get into Ohio State, so jumping through the hoops of everything again. For us, Ohio State, the James is the place to go. That is the place to be in Ohio and in that area. And I called them to get in, and they're like, we're not taking new patients. I was like, what? You're the cancer center, I have cancer, how can I not come there? And ended up the third scope that I had, he had interned and had been part of the team where I ended up. And he's like, I'll get you in there. And so some phone calls were made, and lucky enough, I was able to go to Ohio State.
Okay, so then your treatment started.
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about that journey.
I got lucky, and thanks to the test, and that's why I'm out here, I did not have to do chemo or radiation, because a lot of it you have to do chemo or radiation first, then go through the surgery, then chemo radiation again. I was lucky enough that they said we're going straight to surgery. So November 26th, it was the day before Thanksgiving. So no Thanksgiving in 2024 for me. I had an esophagectomy at Ohio State, 11-hour surgery. They removed the lower third of my esophagus, the top part of my stomach, collapsed my right lung for the procedure, 2 chest tubes, 11 holes, because they did it robotically. I joke now that I look like I've been in a drive-by. But they pulled my stomach up into my chest, reconnected it, so my stomach's now vertical in my chest, connects behind my sternum. A little bit sticks out at the bottom, so eating that's all changed. But, a long 11-hour surgery. For me, I didn't know it was 11 hours. My family, everybody that was in the waiting room trying to see what was going on, they said was miserable, because it just kept going and going and going. As part of that, the first 6 days you're in the hospital, no food or water, nothing, for 6 days. Works out to be a great diet plan at the end. I don't suggest it. There's other ways if you want to try to lose weight than to do this. But so 6 days of nothing, passed a swallow test to where I was able to do liquids, could do liquids for a couple more days while I was in the hospital, then went home to liquids for another month before you moved on to liquids and mashed potatoes for a month. I never thought mashed potatoes would be the greatest thing in the world, but after doing liquids for that long, it was like a steak. And I still laugh. My family having the same sense of humor I have. I'm like, you guys need to eat when I get home. It's all great. So they ordered out like the first night I got home and had steaks and stuff. You know, they're all sitting there, so you're smelling it, but you couldn't eat it. One of the biggest things too, that it was very painful surgery, very painful recovery. I know we've got some people out here that have, you know, are familiar with esophageal cancer and what it does to you. The pain was one thing, but just being stuck in a recliner for so long because you can't lay flat anymore was miserable. And until I could get a muscle relaxer and stuff, I was horrible. And being stubborn like I was, I wouldn't take my oxy because I knew I wasn't going to get hooked. I just wouldn't take it. So the stubbornness on top of everything, it was a pretty rough recovery. And then the mental part of it, we've talked about a lot of things today. Be there for them mentally, because when I had a bad day mentally, I had a bad day physically. They are directly tied together. If I had a positive attitude, it still may have hurt, but it didn't hurt as bad. But if I was down in the dumps, it was bad. And the sad thing is all I could ever think about was, will I ride that truck again? That was it. And that was my fight. Long recovery. To me, if you really look at it, I had surgery in November, and somehow, because Ohio's a presumptive state, so I am a presumptive work cancer, got approved after an appeal and some things. But I was going through my kind of just healing up, getting up, walking around, finally doing some things, and my fire chief called me and goes, hey, did you see your latest D17 form or whatever? I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Workers' comp had sent him a form that said I was approved to come back to work on February 19th. And I'm like, I'm still sitting in a chair, but okay. So me being me, I took that as a challenge and got up, started training, started wearing gear in the gym, started doing stuff, and I actually went back full duty on the truck February 19th after having surgery in November. So made it back to the truck, which made me very happy.
How did that go for you?
Not as good as I thought it was going to. With this surgery and everything, where we talked to me, I no longer have a sphincter flap to help keep things down. So I can, like a new party trick or something, give me a bottle of water, then turn me upside down, it's coming back out. There's a dumping syndrome that I would not wish on my worst enemy, that some days it hits, some days it doesn't. You eat and it'll dump straight into your intestines because your stomach's up and down, and you get very sick. You break out in sweat, and it's either coming up or down or wherever it decides to go that day. So that's all not good when you're at a firehouse or you're in a mask. But luckily, I was able to make it. I worked February 19th till July 10th, when I finally went to my newest doctor that I'd seen before. He used to be one of our department physicians, and he's a big fitness doctor, deals with a ton of athletes. And I love him because he'll throw the F word around. He's funny. He's a good dude. And when I walked in there first, he called me an idiot, which I was like, that should be highlighted on the top of my chart, that everybody knows that. And then he's like, you should not be working. And that's when it really hit that I needed to go. And another thing that should have been a sign, typical firefighter fashion again, my son was in medic school, and I was bringing IVs home from the firehouse because I'm limited on fluid intake, food intake. So the night before my 24-hour shift, I would do an IV at home. And we laugh, we've got a picture of it where we hang our stockings and stuff over our mantle by the fireplace. It's within reach of my recliner. It's a perfect IV hanger that you could put an IV bag on the mantle of your fireplace and sit there in a chair. But that should have been a sign too that I was doing, a 1,000 cc bag of fluid just to make sure I can make it through a shift. So I fought to get back. I'm glad I did, because I said I beat it. I told, everybody that didn't think I could make it back, I could, but I also put my guys in danger. And that's one thing that I told them I would never do was, you're depending on me to get off this truck and make the calls, do the things, and I couldn't do it anymore. So after that day, it was on to the retirement process, which took from July until just the end of January to get through because I did do a disability.
So you not only had to rebuild your health, but you have had to rebuild a big part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that looking like for you now? What opportunities have you taken advantage of? What are you planning on?
Well, first and foremost, I was lucky enough to get asked by GRAIL to do a lot of things. We've done podcasts, we've done a video. I've done a video with the Firefighter Cancer Network. I've signed up to be a mentor with them. I want to share that. I loved teaching, I loved going across the country doing that. So I still want to stay somewhat tied to the fire service and be able to share that and share this experience. I'm home every day now, which for the spouses and stuff in the room, when your firefighter retires and you're used to us being gone, there's that whole adjustment between my wife and I. And she works from home, so I've been thrown out of the house at least a couple of times already. But just looking at doing different things. I might work for a local fire department, just helping them at their training facility. But as part of my retirement, I can never wear fire gear again. That is part of my disability, my retirement, which I came to terms with that. At first, that was very tough. Even doing 30 years, it's just a part of you. And I know we're not told that our jobs define us, but in the fire service, I think it does. It is who we are. And that was the hardest thing to come across. I'm enjoying just some time. Lovely Ohio weather, which is nothing like this right now. We still have snow in the morning and sun in the afternoon. So, but going to go out and do the best I can to go around and spread the message on cancer awareness and then just enjoy what time I do have left.
So now, what, year and a half, almost 2 years out at this point from,
Yep.
what message do you have? What would you like to share with your brothers and sisters in the service?
The biggest thing is get tested, listening to all the data that's out there and it's coming out. I mean, the numbers are the same, they're there. We know it's there, and the older we get, we know it's changing with our bodies, with everything. One of the biggest things to share with your departments, whether you're a chief, a firefighter, company officer, or anything, some of the things I've picked up from listening. First and foremost, this test was 100% confidential. Our department, the only thing my chiefs knew was they had one person from the Galleri test that had some sort of result. They did not know who, they didn't know anything. They never knew I had cancer until I knocked on their door to walk in there to tell them I was going to be off duty for surgery. And with our sick leave and everything, I was fine. And then once it became a workers' comp claim, that changed everything too on the time off. But that is huge. Get tested early. You can put it in as part of your physicals. Just taking care of each other and taking care of your gear, making sure you're cleaning it. Everything that's been talked about is huge, because early in my career, the first volunteer department I was on, we didn't have any of this stuff. If you cleaned your gear at all, you might have sprayed it off with a garden hose and let it dry in the sun, which we all know now that was all like drying in the sun, all that. It's not what you were supposed to do, but it's what we did. And just enjoy your time, enjoy each day. One of the quotes I saw recently was, "You can't have today, today is mine." And enjoy each day, because you never know when that call's coming. We don't want it. I don't wish it on anybody. I wish I could still get on that fire truck. I mean, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I have people ask me, they're like, "Your son's doing this now. Are you worried for him?" I said, "Nope. He was raised in a firehouse. He knows what it's like. Same with my daughter. They both know what it's like. He knows the risks. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world." So enjoy it, take care of your people, whether you're the union side, the firefighter side, the chief side. I think this is one where everybody can agree it's not punitive. Get tested, get taken care of.
Thank you, Kevin.
I think we owe you this.
I would agree. I would agree. For me, it's a privilege to know you. I am happy to have you as a friend. I am so very grateful that you are here with us. Thank you for your service and for your willingness to share so that hopefully others can learn from the experience and that we can help more firefighters have a better outcome if they do happen to have cancer. Thank you.
Yep.